When a man stands before the world and releases a single word, the atmosphere shifts. It is not always the many speeches, the lengthy explanations, or the carefully written documents that transform the course of history. Sometimes it is one word. One word can disrupt nations, awaken consciences, and challenge powers that have grown comfortable. One word can shake the mighty and stir the silent. That is the power of words, not because of the letters they carry, but because of the authority behind them. Every civilization has been constructed not first with weapons, but with words. Words built empires, words wrote laws, words signed treaties, and words declared wars. The greatest revolutions in human history were ignited, not by the noise of armies, but by the utterance of one word at the right time. And when that one word is released from the lips of a leader who carries conviction, courage, and clarity, it penetrates beyond politics and pierces the conscience of nations. There was a moment when a leader from the East spoke before the world, and with one word, he unsettled the West. America, a nation used to framing the narrative, suddenly found itself being framed by a single declaration. That word did not require an army. It did not carry missiles. It did not roar with violence. It whispered with authority. It carried the weight of history, the courage of identity, and the truth of sovereignty. And because truth has a sound, the sound of that word shook America. Why was it so powerful? Because when a man knows who he is, when a nation knows what it stands for, and when a people know their worth, then one word is enough to confront centuries of assumptions. That word became a mirror, and when America looked into it, the reflection was uncomfortable. Greatness does not tremble at noise, but greatness trembles at truth. The truth hidden in that word exposed imbalance, revealed double standards, and reminded the world that no nation has a monopoly on morality. It is important to understand that shaking is not destruction. It is awakening. To shake something is to disturb what has settled, to stir what has become stagnant, to rattle what has been resting too comfortably. America was shaken because one word revealed that the world is shifting. Power is no longer centralized, voices are no longer silent, and nations once dismissed are now demanding dignity. That word was not simply political, it was prophetic. It was a signpost announcing that a new season has come upon the earth. And here is the lesson: never underestimate the power of your voice. Never belittle the authority of one word spoken in truth. Nations can be realigned by a word. Families can be healed by a word. Lives can be transformed by a word. A single word can break chains, redirect destinies, and open doors that no man can shut. The world was shaken because one man dared to believe that his word carried as much weight as the words of the most powerful nation on earth. If that is true for a nation, it is true for you. What word are you afraid to speak? What truth have you been silencing within yourself because you feared the reaction of others? Sometimes your breakthrough, your elevation, your freedom is locked inside a word you refuse to release. America shook because one leader released his word. What would shake in your life if you released yours? When we think about power, most of us immediately imagine weapons, armies, money, or political influence. But there is a deeper, more profound power that is often overlooked, and that is the power of a single word spoken with authority. History itself testifies that civilizations have risen and fallen, wars have been won and lost, nations have been built or destroyed, not first with the clash of swords or the thunder of cannons, but with words that carried weight. A single word, when it comes from a place of conviction and clarity, can travel further than any bullet, reach deeper than any weapon, and impact generations far beyond the moment it was spoken. When a leader stands before the world and chooses his words carefully, what he releases has the capacity to shake nations, unsettle powers, and shift the trajectory of history. A word is not just sound. It is the verbal expression of thought, conviction, and identity. It is a carrier of vision and purpose. When a man or woman speaks with authority, the word they release is not empty. It is filled with the weight of who they are, the values they carry, and the truth they believe in. Authority is what transforms ordinary speech into extraordinary influence. You can speak for hours and accomplish nothing, or you can release one word and change everything. That is why leaders throughout history have been remembered, not for every sentence they spoke, but for the few words that shifted the mindset of nations. When a word is spoken with authority, it exposes hidden realities, it confronts lies, challenges systems, and disturbs the comfort of those who have built their power on silence and compliance. This is why nations tremble, not when armies march, but when truth is declared. Because truth has no borders, It cannot be contained by politics, and it cannot be silenced by threats. The moment it is released, it begins to shake everything that has been built on falsehood. That is why one word spoken with authority can do more than the most powerful weapons ever could. Weapons destroy bodies, but words can liberate souls. Weapons may conquer land, but words can conquer minds and hearts. Consider how revolutions have begun. They did not start when the first gun was fired. They started when one person spoke a word that resonated with the people. A word like freedom, a word like justice, a word like independence, a word like dignity. Those single words carried entire movements, inspired entire nations, and birthed new civilizations. That is the evidence of the power of a word spoken with authority. When that word is born out of conviction and not fear, out of truth and not compromise, it carries a sound that nations cannot ignore. Authority comes from alignment. A person who knows who they are and stands on truth has an authority that cannot be borrowed or manufactured. When such a person speaks, their word carries the weight of their identity. This is why the same word spoken by two different people does not carry the same power. The difference is not in the word, but in the authority behind it. A leader who knows his nation's history, who understands its destiny, and who speaks on behalf of his people carries a word that transcends politics. It becomes more than opinion. It becomes declaration. When Jaishankar spoke that one word, it was not simply a statement for the moment, it was a demonstration of authority. He was not speaking as an individual, but as a voice carrying the weight of a nation's identity and dignity. That is why the word shook America. It was not the syllables themselves, but the authority behind them, the authority of history, the authority of sovereignty, the authority of truth. America did not tremble because of volume. It trembled because of authority. Authority makes nations listen even when they disagree. This is why we must understand that power is not only in possession, but in expression. You may hold wealth, influence, or resources, but if you cannot articulate them into words of authority, they remain dormant. The true mark of leadership is not in holding power, but in expressing it in such a way that it shifts realities. One word, spoken with authority, can dismantle centuries of assumption, it can silence arrogance, and it can restore dignity to those who have been overlooked. Nations rise when their leaders know how to release words of authority, and nations fall when leaders lose their voice or trade their authority for compromise. The power of one word spoken with authority is the reminder that no one is powerless. You may not hold armies or riches, but if you carry conviction, your word can shake environments, redefine relationships, and change the course of your own life. A single word, spoken from a place of truth, can open doors, break barriers, and command respect. It can shift the atmosphere in your family, your workplace, your community. Authority is not given, it is recognized, and when you speak with the authority of truth, your word becomes unstoppable. You said words have always been the architects of history. Long before the first sword was lifted, before cannons fired, before the invention of nuclear weapons, words were shaping the destiny of nations. Every civilization, every empire, every government that has risen or fallen was first built upon the foundation of words. Constitutions are nothing but words on paper, yet they govern millions of lives. Declarations of independence are written in words, and they carry enough power to dismantle centuries of oppression. Treaties are sealed with words, and those words hold back armies from advancing. Wars themselves often begin with words, with speeches, with threats, with declarations that ignite the hearts of men to fight. This is the undeniable reality where shape history more than weapons or armies ever could. When we study the great turning points of the world, we do not first remember the weapons that were used. We remember the words that were spoken. Let my people go. Give me liberty or give me death. I have a dream. These are words that are etched in the fabric of human history, words that outlived the armies and weapons of their time. The power of those words was not in their length or complexity, but in their clarity, conviction, and authority. When words resonate with truth, they bypass barriers, they cross borders, and they awaken the conscience of generations. Weapons can win battles, but words can win wars that weapons never could. Armies can occupy land, but words can occupy hearts. A weapon may silence a man for a moment, but words can make him immortal. That is why rulers and governments have always feared voices more than violence. They ban books, silence journalists, censor speeches, and imprison poets because they understand that words carry more enduring influence than bullets. A bullet can end a life, but a word can ignite a movement that outlives empires. This is why leaders who understand the weight of words carry more influence than leaders who only rely on force. True authority is exercised through speech. It is through words that leaders cast vision, unify people, and inspire courage. Even the mightiest generals must use words to mobilize their soldiers, for without words there is no cause, and without a cause there is no reason to fight. The strategy of warfare itself is dictated by words, for orders are given in words, strategies are communicated in words, and peace is restored by words. Think of how religion spread, not by weapons, but by words. Sacred texts, teachings, parables, commandments, these words have shaped the values, cultures, and laws of nations across the centuries. Billions of lives have been ordered, directed, and transformed, not by military might, but by the spoken and written word. The foundations of morality and justice in societies were laid by words long before legal systems and governments enforced them. Words are the invisible power that shapes the visible structures of the world. Weapons lose their relevance with time, but words gain strength with repetition. The sword of one century is forgotten when the next weapon is forged, but words spoken centuries ago still breathe life into movements today. That is why a speech delivered in one generation can inspire action in another, because words transcend time. They carry memory, identity, and vision. A people without words is a people without history, and a nation without a narrative is a nation without a future. Words are the storytellers of destiny. When Jaishankar spoke, it was not an army that stood behind him, it was words. Yet those words carried the power of an army because they represented history, sovereignty, and truth. America was not shaken by the threat of weapons, but by the authority of words that challenged its position. This is the testimony that words shape history more than weapons. Armies can enforce dominance for a season, but words establish legacies that last beyond time. The British Empire once boasted of its weapons and its reach, but today, what remains in memory are not its cannons, but the words of those who opposed it, words of freedom, resistance, and independence. This is the same in personal life as it is in nations. The words spoken over your life shape your identity more than the circumstances you face. A child grows not by the weapons of his parents, but by the words spoken into his future. Communities are lifted not by the force of armies, but by the words of visionaries who dared to speak hope when despair was normal. That is why the greatest investment you can make in shaping your destiny is to guard, refine, and release your words with intention. History has always been written twice, once with ink and once with blood. But even the spilling of blood often follows the spilling of words. That is why words remain the first battlefield and the most enduring weapon. Armies pass away, but words endure. Thrones crumble, but words live on. And when spoken with clarity and conviction, words not only shape history, they create it. You said, America was unsettled because truth always challenges comfort. Comfort creates a sense of stability, a feeling that things will remain as they are, that the current order is secure and unquestioned. But truth does not allow complacency. Truth comes to disturb what has been normalized, to expose what has been hidden, and to challenge what has been accepted without question. When Jaishankar released that one word, it carried truth that pierced through the layers of diplomacy, politics, and rhetoric, and it unsettled America because truth never bows to power, and it never respects comfort zones. Truth is not intimidated by titles, by wealth, or by military strength. It stands independent, unshaken by status, and it confronts whatever is false, no matter how long that falsehood has stood unchallenged. Comfort is often built on control. Nations that dominate the narrative become comfortable in the illusion that their version of events is the unquestionable reality. They establish themselves as the moral voice, the standard by which all others are measured. But when truth is spoken, it dismantles that illusion. It reminds the comfortable that their position is not eternal, their authority is not unquestioned, and their narrative is not the only one that exists. This is why America was shaken, not because it lacked power, because it faced a truth that could not be ignored or silenced. The challenge of truth is that it reveals double standards. It shines light on the contradictions that power often tries to conceal. When one nation expects accountability from others, but refuses it for itself, truth confronts that imbalance. When one nation dictates morality to others, but ignores its own flaws, truth calls it out. And when one nation assumes the role of judge, truth reminds it that it too can be judged. That is why truth unsettles those in power. It takes away the privilege of selective vision. It forces the powerful to see themselves in the same mirror they hold before others. History shows us that every empire, every dominant power has faced this moment of unsettling truth. Rome faced it, Britain faced it, and America now faces it. The most dangerous thing for a powerful nation is not the rise of another army, but the rise of another voice that speaks truth without fear. That voice disrupts comfort because it refuses to play by the script that has been written by those in power. It announces that there are other perspectives, other realities, other truths that must be acknowledged. That is what makes truth so dangerous to those who benefit from comfort. It cannot be contained and it cannot be controlled. The human heart responds in the same way. Individuals become unsettled when confronted with truth, because truth exposes the difference between who they are and who they pretend to be. It shines a light on hypocrisy, on hidden motives, on unacknowledged failures. People prefer the comfort of excuses, but truth strips away those excuses and demands accountability. Nations are no different. America, like every nation, has built layers of comfort through its narratives, its image, and its dominance. But the moment truth is spoken, that comfort is disrupted, and the cracks in the foundation are exposed. It is important to recognize that truth does not come to destroy, but it comes to correct. Yet correction feels like shaking when you have grown comfortable in error. The more a person or a nation has relied on false assumptions, the more disruptive truth will feel. That disruption is what unsettled America. It was not an attack, it was a mirror. And mirrors make people uncomfortable because they force honesty. A word of truth reflects back what is real, not what is projected. And when the reflection does not match the image one desires, the natural response is to feel shaken. This is why truth must never be underestimated. It does what weapons cannot do. It penetrates defenses that armies cannot breach. It exposes vulnerabilities that no intelligence agency can uncover. It strikes directly at the conscience, and that is why it unsettles the powerful. America was not shaken by military force, but by moral force, by the undeniable weight of a word that revealed a reality too uncomfortable to dismiss. Comfort thrives in silence, but truth is sound, and when sound enters silence, the silence is broken forever. The same principle applies in personal life. Whenever truth enters, comfort is disturbed. When you hear a truth about your own potential, your excuses no longer feel safe. When you hear truth about your relationships, your patterns of denial no longer shield you. When truth comes to confront your fears, your comfort zones begin to tremble. America's shaking was only a global example of what happens in every life when truth arrives. It unsettles, but it also awakens. Comfort hides reality, but truth exposes it. Comfort delays change, but truth demands it. And no matter how powerful, no person and no nation can remain unshaken when truth finally speaks. You said shaking is not destruction, but awakening to a new order. Whenever shaking occurs, whether in a life, a nation, or a system, it is easy to interpret it as collapse or loss. Yet the purpose of shaking is not to annihilate, but to disrupt what has become stagnant and to prepare the ground for something greater. When Jaishankar's words shook America, it was not an act of violence. It was not the tearing down of a nation, but it was a wake-up call that revealed the shifting balance of the world. Shaking disturbs the structures that have grown too comfortable and forces a re-examination of values, positions, and assumptions. It rattles what has been asleep and stirs what has been silent. It is never pleasant, but it is always purposeful. In the natural world, shaking clears what is weak and unstable. An earthquake exposes the strength of foundations. Those structures that are poorly built crumble, while those that are solid remain standing. In the same way, when a shaking occurs in human affairs, it tests the integrity of institutions, governments, and even individuals. Words of truth that cause shaking do not destroy what is solid. They only remove what is fragile, false, or built on illusions. This is why shaking must be understood not as an end, but as a transition into a stronger and more authentic order. Nations, like individuals, grow complacent in times of comfort. Comfort leads to stagnation, and stagnation leads to blindness. Systems of power often assume permanence, but history shows that no order is permanent. Shaking comes to announce that change is inevitable. The world today is shifting. Voices that were once ignored are now being heard, and nations that were once silent are now demanding recognition. That is not destruction, that is awakening. The old order resists because awakening threatens the structures it has built. But awakening cannot be stopped once it begins. The unsettling word that shook America served as a reminder that dominance cannot go unquestioned forever. The shaking revealed that the world is entering a season of multipolarity where no single nation can claim to be the unquestioned authority. That shift may feel like loss to some, but it is growth for the world. Shaking does not eliminate power, it redistributes it. It does not destroy influence, it redefines it. The awakening that comes through shaking is the birth of a new order where voices are balanced and where power must be shared rather than monopolized. Shaking also awakens identity. For too long, many nations have lived in the shadows of dominant powers, hesitant to speak their truth. But shaking emboldens them to rise and claim their rightful place. The one word that caused disturbance was more than a challenge to America. It was a declaration to the world that silence was ending. This awakening calls other nations to find their voice, to no longer bow to narratives that do not reflect their realities. That is the gift of shaking. It empowers the silenced and humbles the loud. In personal life, the same principle is true. Shaking moments come in the form of crises, unexpected events, or confrontations with truth. At first, they feel like destruction, but later they are revealed as awakenings. A job loss may feel like devastation, but it awakens the hidden potential for entrepreneurship. A betrayal may feel like collapse, but it awakens discernment and strength. A challenge to long-held beliefs may feel unsettling, but it awakens clarity and authenticity. Shaking shakes off what you do not need, so that what is essential can remain. The nature of shaking is temporary, but the awakening it produces is lasting. The tremors of disruption are brief, but the clarity that follows is permanent. This is why nations and individuals should not fear shaking, but embrace it as a season of recalibration. It is the shaking that makes room for what is new. The new order cannot be established while the old order still stands unchallenged. That one word that shook America was part of a larger shaking across the world. A signal that the old comfort of unquestioned dominance is giving way to a new reality of shared voice and equal dignity. Shaking also separates what is real from what is false. In calm seasons, illusions thrive, pretenses go unchallenged. But shaking strips away the coverings and forces reality into the open. It demands transparency, it demands accountability, and it demands authenticity. Nations, like individuals, cannot hide during a shaking. Their true values, their true intentions, and their true character are revealed. America's shaking was not simply about its external position, but about its internal contradictions. Shaking exposes the truth not to destroy, but to awaken to what must change. Ultimately, shaking is an invitation to grow. It does not come to destroy identity, but to refine it. It does not come to silence, but to amplify voices that must be heard. It does not come to erase power, but to reorient it towards balance. Awakening is uncomfortable, but it is necessary for progress. The old order resists change, but shaking ensures that change cannot be ignored. When truth is spoken and shaking follows, the world is not ending. It is being reborn into a new dimension of reality. Your breakthrough may be locked in the one word you dare to release. Many people live bound not because they lack potential, not because opportunities are absent, but because they have silenced their own voice. There are truths that remain buried within, dreams that never find expression, convictions that stay unspoken, and visions that die in the mind because they are never articulated. One word spoken in courage can shift your entire life. A single declaration of faith can unlock doors that generations before you could not open. The challenge is not the absence of power. The challenge is the hesitation to release it through your word. A word carries more than sound. It carries identity, intention, and authority. When you release a word that is aligned with truth and conviction, it sets things in motion that cannot be reversed. Nations respond to words, laws are built on words, contracts are bound by words, and lives are transformed by words. Silence may keep the peace temporarily, but it also keeps you bound. When you speak the one word you fear to say, you disturb the atmosphere, you break cycles, and you command attention. That is why your breakthrough is often hidden in a word you have not yet released. Fear is the greatest thief of words. Fear convinces you to remain quiet when your voice is needed. Fear persuades you that silence is safer than speaking truth. Fear tells you that people will not listen, that opposition will be too strong, or that you will lose what little you already have. But every breakthrough demands courage, and courage is expressed through words. Jaishankar's word shook America because it was spoken without fear. He could have chosen silence, he could have chosen comfort, but he released a word, and in that moment, history was shifted. The same is true in your personal journey. The word you refuse to speak is the very word that can unlock your next season. Words release destiny. Throughout history, men and women who changed their worlds did so not first by actions, but by declarations. They spoke what others were afraid to speak. They gave voice to the unspoken fears, the hidden hopes, and the silent frustrations of their people. When they spoke, the world responded. Their breakthroughs began not with armies, but with words. The same principle applies to you. You may be waiting for circumstances to change, but circumstances may be waiting for your word. Until you declare it, nothing moves. There is a creative power in words. Every invention, every movement, every business, every nation began with a word. Someone dared to say what did not yet exist. Someone dared to describe a reality that others could not see. Words bring the invisible into the visible, the potential into the actual, the future into the present. Your breakthrough is not somewhere distant. It is tied to the courage of your mouth. Speak the word of vision, speak the word of identity, speak the word of conviction, and watch the atmosphere respond. The word that unlocks your breakthrough does not have to be long or complicated. Sometimes it is as simple as yes. Yes to opportunity, yes to responsibility, yes to truth. Sometimes it is as simple as no. No to compromise, no to fear, no to staying small. Sometimes it is a declaration like I am ready, or it is time, or I will rise. These words may sound ordinary, but when spoken with conviction, they shift realities. The difference is not in the syllables, but in the authority behind them. Breakthrough is always waiting on a trigger, and the trigger is often your word. The universe, your circumstances, your relationships, and even your own heart respond to what you declare. When you declare fear, fear multiplies. When you declare faith, faith expands. When you declare defeat, you strengthen it. When you declare victory, you begin to walk in it. Your word sets direction, it aligns resources, and it creates momentum. The silence that feels safe is often the silence that delays destiny. Think of how many people remain unseen and unheard because they refuse to speak. A worker never asks for promotion and so remains unnoticed. A leader never declares vision, and so the people remain stagnant. A family member never speaks forgiveness, and so generations remain divided. A believer never speaks faith, and so miracles remain hidden. Breakthroughs are delayed not because they are impossible, but because the word that could unlock them is withheld. The power of one word is evident everywhere. The world itself was framed by words. Laws are enforced by words. Marriages are sealed by words. Nations are governed by words. If everything around us is sustained by the power of words, how much more is your own breakthrough dependent on the word you dare to speak? The authority of your life does not rest in silence. It rests in your declaration. Your world will rise or fall according to the words you choose to release or to withhold. When Jaishankar spoke that one word, he modeled the courage of releasing what needed to be said. It was not simply for America to hear, it was a lesson for the world. Silence may preserve comfort, but it never produces breakthrough. That one word shook the atmosphere of nations, not because of its size, but because it was released. Likewise, your own breakthrough is not locked in the hands of others, it is locked in your own mouth. The moment you release the word, the shaking begins, the atmosphere shifts, and the door opens.